We mentioned how ghulat emerged from within the Imami circles in the early period and how they accelerated their efforts to fabricating ahadith to prove tahrif al-Quran, that the Quran is not in its original form. They did this because they were smart enough to realize that Shi'ism cannot be transformed from a political party to a theological sect. This cannot happen if the Quran is accepted as it is. They could see that the Quran will prevent this from happening. Now, the political claims of the early Shia sect were true. They wanted the Prophet's family to have a central position in the Ummah, wanted them to be accepted as the religious guides, and it's not wrong to want this because Imam Ali al-Ḥasanayn were personally trained by the Prophet and they were so highly praised by the Prophet. What is wrong is that when you exaggerate, when you cross the limit and you start saying what I want is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordained. He made this aqidah part of deen, requirement of salvation. If our sectarian creed is haqq, then it must have basis in the Quran. But when we read the Quran, we see no basis. So therefore the Quran must have been corrupted. And when they saw no evidence for this, they said, let's fabricate the evidence. You will find there were such dodgy people in the history of Islam, especially in the Hadith circles. I will bring to you the statement of Syed al-Sistani and how he talks about people in Hadith circles who used to say, if I come across a statement or some concept which I find to be good, lam ara ba'san an aj'ala lahu isnada. I do not feel any sin in inventing a chain for it. I mean, when you read stuff like this, it blows your mind. You come across some claim, you're like, wow, this is so beautiful. It would have been so nice if the Prophet had said this. In fact, he should have said this. In fact, let me invent a sanad and add to that hadith so that we can make it look like a real, genuine hadith. And in this manner, so many of the statements of different people were attributed to the Prophet of God. People just invented chains for them, which is why you have this problem of not just fabricated texts, you have the problem of fabricated chains. Not only did the ghulat try to argue that there were a lot of verses missing in the Quran, they also attempted to make the verses actually found in the Quran about the Ahlul Bayt, even in cases where the whole meaning and context of the verse does not support that. There are thousands of claims like this. I mean, if you look at Tafsir al-Qummi,
आयत नंबर 83 के ज़ेल में तफसीर बुरहान मुस्तदरकुल वसाइल बिहारुल अनवार वॉल्यूम नंबर 36 और दूसरा 82 या 83 काबिर इब्न यजीद जोफी जो है वो सवाल करते हैं इमाम जाफर सादिक अलैहिस्सलाम से किस बात के लिए इस आयत के तफसीर में कौन सी आयत इन्न मिन शियातिही ला इब्राहिम इमाम सादिक अलैहिस्सलाम कहते हैं कि जब परवरदिगार आलम इब्राहिम को खल्क फरमाया तो एक मरतबा उनके आंखों पर से जो है गैब के पर्दे को हटा जब गैब के पर्दे हट गए तो नबी इब्राहिम जो है वो गैब को देखना शुरू तो अर्श खुदा के करीब पास में रआ नूरन उन्होंने एक नूर को देखा अर्श खुदा के करीब एक परवरदिगार ये कौन सा नूर है कैसा नूर है ये इतना दरख्शान इतना जो है लुमिनस तक़ील लहू परवरदिगार आलम के पास से जो है जवाब आता है हादा नूर मोहम्मदिन सफवती मिन खल्की मेरे तमाम मखलूकात से मैंने इसे चुना ये उसका नूर है फिर जब देखा तो देखा उस नूर के बाजू में एक और नूर है ये कौन सा नूर है दूसरा नूर जो पहले वाले नूर के पास है वक़ील लहू हादा नूर अली इब्न अबी तालिब ये अली का नूर है इन्न मिन शियातिही ला इब्राहिम शियातिही वो ही कौन हिज फॉलोअर्स कौन है लेकिन इन 12 इन 14 नफर और 14 अनवार के अतराफ मिलियंस ऑफ छोटे छोटे सितारों को जो है मैं देख रहा हूं उनके इर्द गिर्द घूम रहा है ये कौन है इस मकाम पे जब इब्राहिम ने ये सब देखा एक मर्तबा हाथों को बुलंद किया गैब मुझे जाहिर कर दिया इन अनवार की मुआरफी कर दी शियत के बारे में बता दिया मैं खुद एतराफ करता हूं उस 14 गुरोह में तो मैं शामिल नहीं होगा लेकिन मैं चाहता हूं ए परवरदिगार अल्लाहुम्मा इन्नी असअलुका अन तजअलनी मिन शियाति अली इब्न अबी तालिब कि मैं परवरदिगार मुझे इन अनवार में शामिल कर दे ये आयत परवरदिगार ने कहा व इन्न मिन शियातिही ला इब्राहिम
if you look at the Quran, Surah As-Saffat, peace be upon Nuh, and then this is how we reward the virtuous. He is indeed one of our faithful servants, and then we drown the others. And then after mentioning the prophetic mission of Nuh, Allah comes to the story of Ibrahim. So he says, "Wa inna min shi'atihi la Ibrahim." Indeed, Abraham was among his followers. So according to the context of the Quran, this pronoun his is returning to whom? Very obvious. It's returning to Nuh, whose mention preceded and came before the mention of Ibrahim. But somehow, this narration from Biharul Anwar, volume 36, according to this narration, Ibrahim alayhi salam, he prayed to God and he said, "Oh God, please make me among the Shia of Amir al-Mu'mineen." So then allegedly the Imam says that is why Allah informed us that wa inna min shi'atihi la Ibrahim. The issue here is something that we can discuss on multiple levels. The first checkpoint, as we had mentioned, is the Rijali checkpoint, and its chain is Muhammad ibn al-Husayni from al-Ḥasan bin Ali bin Abī Ḥamza from Jabir al-Ju'f. Now, as far as al-Ḥasan bin Ali bin Abī Ḥamza is concerned, there is an entry on him in Rijal of Ibnul Ghadhairi. And remember, this book, Rijal of Ibnul Ghadhairi, is the most authoritative work of Imami Ilm al-Rijal according to Ayatullah Sayyid Ali. Ibn al-Ghadhairi says that as far as al-Hasan bin Ali is concerned, he is Waqif ibn Waqif. He's a deviant Waqifite. Waqifite are those people who falsely claim that Imam Kazim had not died when he died, and that he had gone into occultation, and that he was the Mahdi. So he's one of those deviant narrators, da'ifun bi nafsihi, and he is weak in himself. And his father is more reliable than him. His father is himself considered to be Ali ibn Abī Ḥamza la'anahullah. Entry on him shows him as someone that Ibnul Ghadhairi invokes the la'ana of Allah upon, because he is aslul waqf, the root cause of the Waqifite sect. That is why Ibnul Ghadhairi says that his father, who was himself a mal'oon, is better and more reliable than him. And this son is a complete gone case. And then he quotes al-Hasan bin Ali bin Faddal, very famous Imami, Hadith and Rijali authority. He used to say, Inni la astahyi min Allah an arwiya an al-Hasan ibn Ali. I feel shame in front of Allah from narrating anything from this narrator, al-Hasan bin Ali. If you go to the Thaqalain website, and if you go to Kitab al-Du'afa, and if you look at the narrator, you get the entry that Ibn al-Ghadhairi has said he is weak in himself, and his father is more trustworthy than him. Al-Hasan bin Ali bin Faddal said, I fear God that I should narrate anything from al-Hasan bin Ali. So unfortunately, this really highlights a sad reality that we are faced with, that people will just go into a 110 volume encyclopedia like Biharul Anwar, just randomly pick any narration making some really nice tall claims, and without checking the sanad, without checking what the Rijali scholarship has said about this. In fact, as I said, the Rijali scholarship of the sect has made things very simple. I pointed to this book before, Al-Mu'tabar in Bihar al-Anwar, which has been published in 3 volumes. The editors of this book have benefited from the Rijali researches of Ayatullah Asif Muhsini, who is also a classmate of Sayyid Sistani and studied under the Grand Master of Ilm al-Rijal, who is Ayatullah Khui. Both Sayyid Sistani and Sheikh Muhsini studied under him. If you recall, when we talked about volume 36,
volume number 36 और दूसरा 82 या 83,
I had mentioned to you how this entire volume was deleted from the authentic collection of narrations from Biharul Anwar. They could not authenticate the narrations from it from a traditional chain-based paradigm. So they discarded the entire volume, and they discarded many such volumes. This is how the 110 volume encyclopedia of Biharul Anwar ended up in 3 volumes. When you filter the chain, and I mentioned this is just the first level of scrutiny. After that comes the content scrutiny. Once you start doing content scrutiny against the Quran, you will lose many more narrations from these volumes as well. A defense has been offered for this.
Now it's very easy for people to just say, hadith zaif. Look, I don't want to discuss all of this. Lakum dinakum waliya din. We don't care about it. अगर ये zaif थी तमे ना मानो. और याद रखजो, अगर इब्राहिम बैना शिया थी तमे लटकी जैसो. अपन ने काई नहीं करो. नहीं मानो नहीं मानो. zaif थी hadith zaif. मारा माथा ऊपर बस. पण हूँ तो मानीस. I'll tell you why. આપણે જ્યારે question answer session હશે ત્યારે કેસ. એમ નથી કે આપણે નથી કહી શકતા. પહેલા પછી કીધું હતું આજે વાળ જે થયા ધૂપમાં સફેદ નથી થયા.
So he tries to argue, he says, well, so what if it is da'if? And then he also tried to imply that somehow because, my beard is white, I know what I'm talking about. This is a very weird method of hadith authentication. This is Grand Ayatollah Sheikh Muhammad Asif Muhsini. His beard is also way whiter and way bigger in size, because the highest authorities of the 12er Imami sect have rejected these narrations. And not only have they rejected these narrations, they have issued very sincere and humble appeals to beware of narrations. Just because it's found in Biharul Anwar, in Tafsirul Burhan, doesn't mean that the narration is authentic and reliable. And that's why I would like to end by presenting to you beautiful words by this great scholar, Ayatullah Asif Muhsini. He went through the entire 110 volumes, chain by chain, painstakingly. In the introduction, he wrote some really, really precious words. They are not coming from some Wahhabi or Salafi. They are coming to us from a grand 12er Imami Shia Mujtahid. He says, أكثر الروايات المستخرجة والمنقولة في البحار غير معتبرة سندا. Most of the narrations which are cited in Biharul Anwar are inauthentic and unreliable. So Sheikh Muhsini is warning against this. Look, we have a very rich hadith corpus, but it doesn't mean that you just randomly pick any narration. It is very possible that the narration you pick is a fabrication, complete lie, shameless lie against the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. The grave disadvantage that has resulted from hadith compilers like Allama al-Majlisi mentioning and including weak and unreliable narrations in their compilations is that it can be seen in the reliance of scholars in addition to non-scholars on the text of such narration, and their failure to take into account the weakness and unreliability of the chains of the narrations due to the weakness of their narrators by virtue of them being liars, exaggerators, or unverified narrators. In fact, a group of scholars who are familiar with Ilm al-Rijal, like the author of Biharul Anwar, Al-Allama al-Majlisi, do not like to explicitly state that that a khabar al-wahid, a single chain report, has no hujjiyah, no evidentiary value when it has no corroborating evidence. And they ignored the shortcomings in the chain fi maqam al-istidlal, when they are in the process of deriving and deducing conclusions based on those reports. And this behavior is very strange from them. He says, indeed, you see many of the preachers, people of the pulpit, writers and muqallideen, presenting the narrations of the ghulat, extremist and deviant exaggerators, as zabeen, notorious and compulsive liars, and majhuleen, unverified narrators, as ahadith of the Prophet and Imams, as if they are qat'i, decisively established sunnah, or as if they are like Quranic verses in terms of authenticity and reliability, just because they are found in Biharul Anwar or other books. So do you see, this is a very accurate diagnosis and analysis of the mindset that we are seeing on our community pulpits. As we saw that narration from Biharul Anwar, this is the book Al-Mufid min Mu'jam Rijal al-Hadith, the summary of gradings of Ayatullah Sayyid al-Qasim. When it comes to al-Ḥasan bin Ali, who is the narrator of this hadith that Ibrahim prayed to be a Shia of Ali, he says this narrator, he is a kadhabun mal'oon, a serial liar, and he is cursed because he used to lie against Ahlul Bayt and attribute false tafsir to them. Ayatullah Muhsini goes on to say, thus they promote these narrations on the manabir and in books, in magazines and newspapers with such eloquent expressions and attractive wordings that the hearts are affected by it like magic. Especially if the cover of the book is well designed, the common Muslims believe that its content, even if it be in the form of weak narrations, is a central part of the religion and that it is coming to us straight from the tongue of the Prophet and his successor. Ayatullah Asif Muhsini proceeds to refute one of the copes that was used from the mimbar in Dar es Salaam. The cope was, so what if it is da'if? I trust it, I want to believe in it, makes me feel good, guarantees me salvation, so I will believe in it. If it turns out to be true, we will be successful and everyone who was not a Shia would be destroyed. And if it turns out to be false, what did I lose? No. Ayatullah Muhsini says, if this turns out to be false, why are you thinking that there are going to be no consequences? Do you not know the consequences of lying against Allah and the Messenger? He says a da'if hadith, especially one that is fabricated, because it's making tall claims and attributing lies to Allah, you could lose your entire hereafter because of being guilty in the court of Allah of having promoted lies against him. Don't you see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in 9 separate places in the Quran, he says, وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ مِمَّنْ افْتَرَى عَلَى اللَّهِ كَذِبًا, who can be a greater zalim than who invents and fabricates a lie and attributes it to Allah. This hadith, Ayatullah Muhsini says, what assures them from the possibility that these narrations may be fabrications of the fabricators, inventions of the hadith manufacturers or ignorant transmitters? How can we treat these narrations as sayings of the Prophet? Allahu adhina lakum am ala Allahi taftarun. Has Allah permitted you to do so, or do you invent lies about Allah? Wa an taqulu ala Allahi ma la ta'lamun. And Allah has strictly forbidden you that you say about Allah that which you have no certain knowledge of. Wa la taqulu ala Allahi illa al-haq. And do not say about Allah anything except the truth. Ayatullah Sani continues, he says, it is unfortunate that the task of authoring and preaching has fallen into the hands of people who do not deserve it, and it is a means of earning for them. This has been the theme of this entire Muharram Ashara, that people, instead of honoring the actual goals and objectives of Imam Hussein, they have tried to convert his gain into their gain. So woe unto those who write the scripture with their own hands and say this is from Allah in order to exchange it for a small price. Woe to them for what their hands have written, and woe to them for what they earn. And then he goes on to say, this tragic condition has led to the formation of a culture of distortions and misrepresentations in knowledge, ethics, and beliefs. And it is so rooted in the minds of the common people that a group of the most learned scholars cannot speak about Islaah, about course correction, because of the fear of revolt and uprising of the masses and the general public. But you see, he has put his finger on a very big problem in our community, which is that he's saying that this tragic condition which the Ahlul Mimbar have created by presenting so many false and fabricated narrations from the Mimbar, they have distorted and changed the Aqidah of the public, and now the Aqidah of the public has become so false and so deviant and so wrong that now it has become even very difficult for the Khawas, like who are the most advanced level well-versed scholars of the sect? Well, Ayatullah Muhsini himself is one of them, and similarly al-Sistani. Sometimes people ask, why are they not doing Islaah? Why does it have to be a bunch of kids who do Islaah? Ayatullah Muhsini, who is a student of Ayatullah Khoi and a classmate of Sayyidi Sistani, is telling you this is why we are silent. We are not able to speak about Islaah. And why? Because we fear the revolt and uprising of the Awam. The Awam has been taking its Aqidah from narrations the Zakirin present, which they take from the fabrications of the Ghulat. Now the Aqidah of the Awam has become like the Aqidah of the Ghulat. Now if you go to the people who have the Aqidah aqidah of the ghulat, and you try to present to them the actual aqidah of the imam, the actual aqidah of the imam will not make sense to them. The awam will start character assassinating you. They will start thinking you're a traitor. So this is why the most learned scholars of the 12 Imami sect are afraid. The lower level scholars have spoiled the public so much that now they fear the revolt and uprising of the awam. This is a great danger to the deen. This is not something light that we can take easy. And that's why he recites, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un.